္ဂလာပါခင်ဗျာ DVB ရုပ်မြင်သံကြားအစီအစဉ်မှာကြိုဆိုပါရစေဒီနေ့ကျွန်တော်တို့စတူဒီယိုမှာဖိတ်ခေါ်ထားတာကတော့သတင်းစာဆရာကြီး Larry Jagan ဖြစ်ပါတယ်သူကမြန်မာအရေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့သတင်းတွေကိုလွန်ခဲ့တဲ့နှစ်ပေါင်း30စလုံးလောက်ကိုင်ခဲ့တာဖြစ်ပါတယ်မြန်မာနိုင်ငံရဲ့မီဒီယာဖွံ့ဖြိုးတိုးတက်မှုနဲ့ပတ်သက်လို့တွေ့ဆုံမေးမြန်းမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ခင်ဗျာ So Larry, you've been working and covering as a journalist for Burma Myanmar issue for the last 30 years. So far, what has been changed and what need to be changed and about the Myanmar media landscape?
Well, I think there's certainly been a lot of changes since 2011. I have to say, when I was first covering Myanmar for the BBC, I could not have envisaged today where I'm sitting in a studio with the XR media in Yangon. This in itself is a very important change. The XR media have been welcomed back. You're able now to broadcast within the country. That's a major change. There's obviously a vibrant press. Newspapers are starting, magazines are starting, but of course it's a very competitive market, so not all of them survive. So there's no doubt that we are now getting greater access to media outlets than ever before. And the journalists here have been very courageous in trying to push the boundaries of censorship and what is allowed. And of course we've also seen the development of a very vibrant social media, and this is a healthy thing, but of course it can also have drawbacks in that it isn't regulated in the same way that official media is. There have been attempts by the government to introduce progressive legislation that will actually guarantee journalists' rights, allow freedom of expression, and allow entertaining news programs. But I think the government is in two minds, because particularly with the elections coming up in 2015, they don't want to see control really lifted. And I think there is this dilemma. They want a free press, they want to be seen to have a free press, but at the same time they want to control it. They want to muzzle it.
So what does not change is that kind of mentality that they say want to control the press instead of encouraging media development. So they have a more control mentality. Is that what you say?
Exactly. I think that the Ministry of Information is trying to control the development of the media. They understand it's an important area that shows that democracy is taking root in this country. So they want to be able to show to the world that they have a vibrant, independent media. But at the same time, they want to limit that. They do not want it to be too free. For instance, what we're seeing is reforms that allow for the development of the print media. But we do not see the reforms that are necessary for the development of independent television and radio. And that's unlikely to happen until after the elections, because the government, I feel, would be too worried about losing control.
When you talk about reform, especially media reform in Myanmar, and there is the key player is the Ministry of Information. Recently, there is a new information minister, Uyatut. And what do you think? You know, there is another 20 months left to carry on this media reform. What need to be done, and what have been done, and what do you think? What will be the future media landscape in this country?
Well, what is certainly the case is that the Ministry of Information has been at the forefront of trying to revolutionise the media in this country. They have encouraged it. They've had all sorts of conferences. They've had key players from abroad come and share their experience. They're encouraging training, independent training of journalists, because this is really very critical for the future of the Burmese media landscape. But at the same time, it's still the Ministry of Information, and what they are doing is still trying to control the media. Sure, there's talk of the New Light of Myanmar being made into a sort of public service newspaper. There's talk of MRTV becoming a public service television. I think all that is a long way off, and while there is a conflict of interest within the Ministry of Information. That is between the ministry that is looking after journalists, that's looking after the media, that controls the government channels, and the spokes role for the government, representing the government, then there is going to be limited chance of real independence for the media in this country. I think this has to be separated. The spokes role for the government has to be in the President's office. This is the case in most countries in the world, that the representative that speaks to the press, that if you like is the spin doctor for the government. It's the same in the States. The State Department has its spin doctor, the President has its spin doctor, but they are in the government's office. The ministry that looks after the media is separate, because you cannot be speaking for the government and at the same time being something of an independent patron for the development of the media. So that is something that has to happen if we're to see real media freedom in this country.
Recently, President U Thein Sein made a remark that Myanmar is the most press freedom in ASEAN contact. What do you think? Because you are based in Thailand and also you've been lots of coverage in the Southeast Asia. You were the editor for the news desk for the Asia. So what do you think about this comment? What is your opinion about this President comment?
Well, on one hand, I have to sympathize with the President, because I think to some extent it's true. The media freedom in this country is very impressive compared to the rest of the region. Perhaps only Indonesia is freer than Myanmar. But at the same time, what we've seen in other countries is the freedom increase and then decrease again. For instance, in Thailand would have been a much freer media environment a year ago than it is today. So I think that there's no doubt that Myanmar has a lot to boast. The President's right in boasting that it's one of the freest in the region. The freest, I think the jury is out. If the kinds of reforms that they're talking about get implemented, then it could be true. I hope by 2015 his boast that Myanmar has the freest press and television in the region is true, because that augurs well for the elections.
But in Thailand, no journalists go to jail. But in Burma, Myanmar, there some journalists are being charged with the penal codes and not with the media. What do you compare with that? What do you say about this comparison about harsh punishment for the journalist?
No journalist should be in prison for providing information and news to the public. No journalist should be in jail for trying to make government accountable and transparent. There is no justification for putting journalists into jail. That's not to say that journalists shouldn't be controlled if they step out of line, if they libel people or get information incorrect, if they contravene trespass laws, for instance. They should be reprimanded, perhaps even fined, but not put into jail. And the thing the government has to understand, and not just the executive, but the parliament, the local administrations, is that laws can be invoked against journalists that shouldn't be. Penal codes are not ones that should be used against journalists. If there is a problem, then they need to take it up with the Myanmar Press Council, for instance. I mean, no one is saying journalists get it right all the time, or that journalists should be above the law. They have to be subject to the law in the same way as everyone else. But there has to be a due process, and locking them up for trespassing or allegedly revealing state secrets, this is unacceptable. It doesn't happen in most other countries. It's certainly not something that's consistent with democracy.